Hello, everybody, and thank y'all for tuning in to this impromptu. Well, it seems impromptu. It's actually been planned for a few days now, but it's impromptu insofar that I just posted the link on YouTube today because I tend to be a procrastinator. But I'm glad that those of you who are here are here. I have a pleasant surprise for you all, and that is, of course, my interview with the great Vince Everett Ellison. He's an author. He is a commentator. He is a brilliant thinker, and he's also the most well-dressed man in the conservative movement. I actually have to step my game up by putting on a tie today. So, but we're going to be talking about the MLK Project, which is a docuseries that I produced. We are halfway through season 1, and season 2 is set to begin airing and streaming early next year. I've had the honor of going up to Lynchburg, Virginia, to sit down with the most well-dressed man in modern conservatism, and we were able to talk about the legacy of Martin Luther King, among other things. And we're going to continue that conversation here and now. And I'm also going to play a clip from episode 7 of the MLK Project, which has not yet been released. At least that episode has not yet been released. And we're also going to be talking about this recent mayoral victory of Zohran Mamdani. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So without further ado, Mr. Vince Everett Ellison, how are you today, sir?
Hey, man, I'm great, Chad. So good to be with you. I appreciate you calling me the best dressed man in the conservative movement. You're the most intelligent man in the conservative movement. So me and you together, we're kind of like Forrest Gump and Bummer. We take over the world, man.
I'll take it. How have you been, man?
Man, life is beautiful. God is good. It's fall in the Blue Ridge Mountains. You know, there's no more beautiful place in the world than that.
Yeah. You've been getting some hate lately, haven't you?
Oh, and I love it. We're not causing people to scream and yell at us. We're not doing the job. You've been getting a little bit on your end too. So obviously we're causing a reaction. And of course, these people are who they are. I mean, they killed our good friend Charlie Kirk. They tried to kill Trump twice. They're fighting, and Black Lives Matter burning up the nation. And now you got these No Kings marches and the illegals. It's just a bunch of perverts, liars, psychopaths, anti-Christian bigots. Bunch of thugs, hoes, and rappers out there raising hell. And all they can do is just flail about and fight because they have no argument.
Yeah. I wanted to get to some of the friendly fire, although I don't want to necessarily call it friendly because I don't really know the intentions of some of these guys. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, when you study American history, when you study psyops and controlled opposition and cultural and ideological infiltration and subversion, you never know really who's a friend and who's a foe.
Right.
And when you look at how the communists infiltrated the Protestant and Catholic seminaries over the course of the 20th century, not for the purpose of furthering God's kingdom, but rather for the purpose of furthering Marx's kingdom or Satan's kingdom, quite frankly, you never know what the real intentions of some of these so-called pastors and theologians are, whether they are there to be subversive or whether they're there to, just spark conversation and try to think in a more nuanced way. And I'm talking particularly about some of the so-called Christians who are coming after folks like you and myself for doing what we're doing in terms of exposing the legacy of King and the civil rights movement. But we'll get to that later. I want you to tell us quickly about some of your books that you've written. I know there's the Iron Triangle. And then there's the 25 Lies. Were there any others that you've written?
Yeah, man, I wrote a book called Crime Inc. It talked about how the Democratic Party is part of like a crime family, and how they make a lot of their money and they get their power from doing things like, the unions, like the crime and the crime families do. They control the unions, the teachers' unions, just like the mafia does. Mm-hmm. How they get their money from the drug cartels. All the drug cartels have lobbyists. They have these attorneys up in DC that they pay on contingency. They pay them millions of dollars, and these guys then give fundraisers for Democrats, and of course they keep the border open. I talk about how they use street money and souls to the polls and ballot harvesting, how they steal elections. So the whole book just shows how they use these mafia tactics to stay in power, how they use intimidation, like they did with the Ku Klux Klan, and how they did with the red shirts, and how they did so many things back in the past. They still do it now. So that book talks about that. And then my last book was a book that I wrote, and it's very interesting because I called it The End of Tolerance. I talk about the fact that the Democrats and the leftists have used our tolerance, you talk about it a lot also, to allow them inside of our schools, inside of our families, inside of our politics. They tell us if we turn them away that we're intolerant. They have words for us like homophobe, transphobe, xenophobe, something to make you retreat from your stance. And they will use those words to, I guess, shame us into allowing the most nefarious, most demonic, and really the most terrible things in society to come into our schools, to come to our communities, to come to our churches, our places of worship. And we've done it, and now they've taken over. Mm-hmm. So it's time for us to end our tolerance. Jesus Christ was not tolerant of sin.
Right.
He told us to repent from it. He told us to rebuke it. He didn't tell us to accept it. And tolerance is just acceptance. And what one generation tolerates, the other generation will completely accept. And we see that now.
Right. No, I'm so glad you're writing on that. And I'm so glad that actually more people are writing on exactly that point. With your book, I know Allie Beth Stuckey, she wrote a book called Toxic Empathy, which covers the same thing.
Yeah.
Vodi Bakum, the late Vodi Bakum, wrote a book called Fault Lines. And I would like to see more people writing on exactly that, because what we've seen, especially over the course of the 20th century, is the fact that people have been deceived by these evil forces who seek to creep in unnoticed. And they do so by, I mean, you of course know this, so I'm preaching to the choir here, but they do this by finagling their way into our institutions, to your point, education, church, entertainment, things of this nature, by appealing to people's ignorance or vulnerability or naivete, thinking that they mean well, using words like tolerant and, we have to be kind and we're all the same and all the things. And the idea is to get you to let your guard down because you're neutralized by these comfy words that are just tools of deception, quite frankly. And I think, we as Christians especially are called to have discernment. And a lot of us lack discernment. We are easily taken advantage of by people who mean us harm, psychological harm, harm to our society long term. And they do so by neutralizing us. There's a book called Public Opinion, and I talk about this all the time. It was written by Walter Lippmann and published in 1921 or 22. But he talks about that very thing. He says that if there's a policy of campaign that the manufacturers of that campaign understand from the inception will be difficult to sell to the American public, what they do is they put forth a speaker, an orator, who can get into the good graces of the people by appealing to symbols, by appealing to what's familiar, what's patriotic, and what's religious. Mm-hmm. And after having gotten to the good graces of the people, because you're using the symbols that they're familiar with, they will accept you, and as an extension of that, accept whatever policy of campaign that you put forth. Never mind the fact that policy of campaign is foreign to those symbols that you invoked from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. It's what you get with Martin Luther King. Yes. He's talking about, I have a dream that one day my children will be judged by the content of their character as opposed to the color of their skin. He's saying things that people can get behind, but at the same time, simultaneously, he's pushing a Marxist campaign that's actually anti-meritocracy, that's actually anti being judged by the content of your character. That actually is, I mean, the policies that he's actually advocating for were the fertile soil for DEI, affirmative action, all the rest that comes after it, that actually is not meritocratic in nature or in essence. And so what Walter Lippmann was communicating in that book was basically the tools of deception, which we see today. So anyway, that's my long kind of whimsical way of saying thank you for writing that, because I think that's desperately needed, because we need to have discernment, and books like what you're writing helps. But more importantly, we need to draw near to God, because God promised that in our drawing near to him, he will then draw near to us. So
yeah, they tell this lie, and they're trying to make us believe that we can make heaven on earth, and we all crave it. But you and I both know that's not possible, not without Jesus Christ. They think we can bring it through man. So when the King talks about all of this togetherness and this love and all of that, instead of saying let's go to Jesus for it, he says let's go to government for it. Mm-hmm. And that's where he misses the point. They always want to go around Jesus Christ. They always want to go around it and say that we can do it. That's what the communists and the Marxists promise. We can give everybody can live together in peace and harmony, and we can all give everybody the same thing, and we can love one another, and we can have this utopia here on earth if y'all just give us power. And instead of people say, no, you don't know how to do this, we have to give this to Jesus, and if it comes about, it'll be through him. It will not be through man. Mm-hmm. And they keep telling this lie, just like Mamdani up in New York. We can feed everybody. We can have government grocery stores. Everybody can have food. Everybody can have a car. Everybody can have a house. But how do you do it? And he just said, we'll just will it. Right. We'll just make it happen. But we know that throughout human history, when you start looking at the character of human beings and human nature, like you said, merit, incentives, capitalism, a free exchange of goods and services, and capital is what makes this happen. Not a gun to the head, not coercion, not law, but men and women freely and actively wanting to look out for their own self-interest. And in doing that, we elevate each other every time. In this society, I'm a little bit selfish, because I know that if you find your gift, it's going to help me. Mm-hmm. I want you to be a good doctor, so when I go to the hospital, I can be taken care of. I want you to be a good chef, so when I pay my money, I'll get a good meal. Right. I want you to be a good mechanic, so that when I take my car to the shop, it'll be fixed. So I want you to find your gift, and then I want to come to you, and we have a free exchange. Your gift for my money, I get what I want, you get what you want. We both elevate, everybody's happy. But you and I both know that Marxism and communism will not give you that. It's a gun to the head, it's force, it's them telling you what you must do, and the whole thing falls apart, because human nature just doesn't work that way.
100%, 100%. I wanted to get off into, because I have a lot I want to cover in such a short amount of time. I want to get off into this scene from episode 7 of the MLK Project, and we can talk about it, and hopefully that will kind of bleed into the Zohran Mamdani conversation. So here's a clip.
Once Levison was introduced to MLK, he became the primary financier and organizer. They started the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Stanley Levison was the mastermind behind the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Stanley Levison and Baird Russell set it up. They wrote the bylaws and everything for it. They set the whole thing up to be exactly what it was. A radical Trojan horse into the black church.
On our mass protest.
Stanley got Jim Jackson, the communist leader of the Southern Negro Youth Congress, to recruit Marxist ministers into the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Jim Jackson was the Southern secretary of the party. He recruited many of the people who then became leaders of the movement: C.T. Vivian, Shulsworth, Lowry, Wyatt T. Walker. These were all ministers in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, organization that Martin Luther King came to head.
These guys are a bunch of apostate hoodlums, man. It's an apostate church. And Stanley Levison started it.
I mean, they operated under the Southern Negro Youth Congress. They wouldn't run around the South talking about they were communists. They were in the Southern Negro Youth Congress, but they also happened to be communists. Jim Jackson, those are mentors of mine. Those guys put me on the right track.
It is in the Constitution of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that no communist can be in the membership, certainly not in any official position, and we are very vigilant in grappling with this problem.
Are you denying that there has been considerable communist influence in the movement generally, or just in your organization?
I'm denying both. I'm denying that there has been any infiltration in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in particular, and in the civil rights movement in general.
It's very troubling that Martin Luther King, a supposed minister of the gospel, was actively lying about communists' involvement in his organization and in the civil rights movement. He was literally being a deceiver. This fact alone reveals what his true interest was, not to call upon people to repent and follow Christ, but to use the church in his position as a minister in pursuit of a cause that's actually anti-Christ. So that's a clip from episode 7 of the MLK Project, which will be released in a couple of weeks, that particular episode. Vince, do you care to elaborate any more on that scene? And I want you also to speak to this tactic of denying affiliation with communism when it's very clear that King was affiliated with communism. What say you about all that?
Yeah, man, it's really sad. It's great that you're bringing this up, Chad, and the work that you're doing is phenomenal. And people are talking about it all over the country, really all over the world, because you know, it's extraordinarily brave, as you know, to take on an icon like King and bring all of this out. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking the time to put this together and bring it and put out this masterpiece. It's amazing. I watched it and I'm just in awe of it. Thank you for doing it. But what you said about Stanley Levinson was true. And of course, we all know that these communists at that time, they understood that they could not ever admit that they were communists. You could not. It's like being in the mafia, right? You have to always deny it. Always. They ask you, I don't know what you're talking about. The mafia is a figment of your imagination. It does not exist. You know, they said that all the time. And the communists were the same way. They knew that as long as they denied it, no one could ever no one could ever prove that they were. It's almost like when they talk about now about, you know, being gay, right? How you know a guy's gay? He just tells you that he is. And I'm sure of that, what you got, right? Same thing with this. You have to admit to it. I don't care what they have. If you don't admit to it, they can't prove it. So Martin Luther King Jr. is hanging out with all of these communists, and as you know the story. Deke DeLoach from the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department told King, you got all of these communists in your organization, you got to get them out. King wouldn't do it. Deke DeLoach went to Bobby Kennedy, said, Bobby, will you please go and talk to Martin Luther King Jr.? Tell him about Stanley Levinson, tell him about David Rustin, tell him about Jack O'Dell, tell him about Clarence Jones, tell him to get these guys out because we're affiliated with him now. Bobby Kennedy went and told him about these guys. He still refused and denied it. And then right before the March on Washington, John F. Kennedy took him in the Rose Garden because he thought the Oval Office might be bugged. So he said, Martin, can you come with me in the Rose Garden? He went into the Rose Garden and gave King a little lawyer talk. He said, I know you know that you're under surveillance. Because Kennedy wasn't supposed to tell him this. This was top secret information. He said, you got guys in your organization that are communists. And he named them. You got Stanley Levinson. You got David Rustin. You got Jack O'Dell. You got to get rid of these cats. And when Martin Luther King tried to deny it, he said, listen, I'm the president of the United States of America. I know these guys' names. You just think I just pulled their names out of a hat? He talked about this guy in Great Britain, the prime minister, name was Propofol at the time. He said, you ever heard this? You heard what's going on in Great Britain? He said, this guy got caught up in a sex scandal and he's lost his government. He said, it can be the same thing here with me and you. If you go down, I go down. Get rid of them. King said that he would. A few weeks later, J. Edgar Hoover had heard about this communist meeting of spies. He put up some cameras to see who was going to be there. And Martin Luther King Jr. ends up meeting with this nest of spies. And he takes the wiretaps for Bobby, he takes the pictures of Bobby Kennedy and said, I thought he said he's going to cut these guys loose. And that's when Bobby Kennedy put the wiretaps on him because he couldn't trust him. That's the story behind how he started getting wiretapped and all of that. He lied to the president of the United States of America, the attorney general of the United States of America, and the guy over the Civil Rights Division of the United States of America, just to protect his communist friends. And this is how the whole government of the United States of America was behind the civil rights movement because they didn't want King to go down because they knew he was the face of it. They wanted to get these laws passed. They wanted to get the UN off of their backs. They wanted to get the communists and Stalin and the Comintern off their backs. So they were using the way black people were treated in America as cannon fodder. I mean, as a cause to get all the countries in Africa and all of the countries in Asia to turn communist. And they wanted to get this monkey off of the American people's back. King was a horse they were riding, but they found that King was compromised, but they got it done anyway.
Right. And you talked on this briefly in what you just said, which is all on point. But also talk a little bit about, because a lot of people would hear what you're saying about this deny, and relating it to the mafia. And while true, people will also say, well, what's the purpose of denying? Because we live in a democracy. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. But people should have the right to say what they want to say and feel how they want to feel about their ideology. This is one of the things that I get pushback from people like Delano Squires and others, where it's like, King never said he was a communist, therefore he was a communist. They take his word for it. In fact, he said that communism is, an evil ideology and it can't have any camaraderie with Christianity. And I'm paraphrasing, but this is what they point to say, see, King said he wasn't a communist, and he even went so far as to renounce communism publicly. But I think one of the things that these individuals take for granted is the fact that we were in the midst of the Cold War. So talk a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah, as you said, communism and Christianity are incompatible, but King wasn't a Christian. So that's how it worked for him. I mean, he didn't believe in the deity of Christ. He didn't believe in the resurrection. He believed in heaven and hell. He didn't believe in the virgin birth. So, of course, yeah, it is incompatible with Christianity, but King wasn't a Christian, so it worked for him. So it was that, and it was the fact that people don't understand now how intense the Cold War was back in those days. I can remember it when I was a child, but this was like the 70s and the 80s. But in the 60s, it was very intense. Castro had just taken over Cuba, and Cuba was 90 miles from the United States of America, and we just had the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this was real, for real. You had Che Guevara and Castro down in Cuba blowing people's brains out. They were killing people. You had Vietnam going on, and the communists were at that time we were trying to take over Vietnam, and the Vietnam War was going on. You also had the fact that Mao Zedong had just taken over China. It was communist, and you had a lot of communists fighting and infiltration down in Africa, where a lot of the old European and powers were being taken over by a lot of the Black Africans fighting in Africa. As a matter of fact, Nelson Mandela, he was a communist during that time, and they were fighting down there. So the United States government understood this, and they understood the philosophy of the Communist Party. What was it? The domino effect. We're going to take over every country in the world. And then the last one we're going to get is the United States of America. We knew this was their plan. We saw it in full effect. And now they were over in the Western Hemisphere in Cuba, 90 miles away. And we knew they were trying to infiltrate the United States of America. So they was coming through, and you write about this, you talk about this very, very well. They've been doing this since the late 1800s, actually. And they were definitely doing it after World War I. So they had tried to infiltrate the blacks down south with the sharecroppers. They tried to unionize them. They tried to do it in the union movement, but they got inside of the civil rights movement, and they really started getting some headway. And Martin Luther King Jr. and the people in the civil rights movement understood that if it ever got out into the American public that this movement was controlled by communists, that they were going to give the government everything they needed to tear them down, to destroy them, to go in and put the hammer to them. The government was already coming down on the Black Panthers. They were already coming down on RAM. And people said that the FBI hated the civil rights movement. That's not true. There was this group called RAM, the Revolutionary Action Movement, headed by Maxwell Stanford. And these guys were hard, man. They hated the civil rights movement. They were hardcore, hate white America, and they wanted to separate from America, and they didn't like the integration concept of the civil rights movement. They had a plan to assassinate the leaders of the civil rights movement. Roy Wilkins, the people from CORE, they was going to come in and kill him. J. Edgar Hoover had infiltrated RAM and found out about their plans to kill these guys. Now, if J. Edgar Hoover had hated Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement, he would have allowed RAM to go in and kill all of these guys, and he would have stepped back and said, look at this, man, N-words killing N-words. Ain't this a shame? And would have just let them kill them, then lock them up. Instead, Hoover stopped RAM from assassinating members of the civil rights movement. He stopped it. Why did he stop it? Because it was a policy of the United States government to try to get try to end this whole ignorant crap down south with separation based on races and keeping people from voting and all of the violence. They wanted it stopped because it was bad PR for the United States of America, and the civil rights movement was their key to getting it done. Martin Luther King Jr. and his crew, though, had a whole nother plan behind it. Theirs was Marxism, completely, ultimately Marxism. They wanted to end the Vietnam War. They wanted, as you know, free medical care. They wanted free housing. They wanted free this, free that, free everything. And they got it. They ended the Vietnam War. They got all their free stuff. Now they're about to implode the United States of America. He has become an icon. So it was very, very, very well done. They even put themselves in a place where they were indispensable to the United States government, because they knew that if they took down Martin Luther King Jr., that the civil rights community was going to implode on itself, and everything they had worked for to get their image polished in front of the world was going to fall apart. So Martin Luther King Jr. is basically Rasputin. Remember Rasputin when he was in the court of the Tsar, and he could do anything he wanted because he knew that the Tsar couldn't kill him. The Tsar couldn't kill him because the Tsar believed that he was the only person that could heal his son that was a hemophiliac. And because Rasputin knew he had this power, he acted a fool, walking around, sleeping with everybody, drunk, fighting, and the Tsar couldn't do anything to him. Martin Luther King was the same way. He believed that the federal government needed him to keep the black people under control, to get these civil rights laws passed. And as long as they needed him, he'd do whatever the hell he wanted. And believe me, he did. Yeah,
those are all really solid points. It's interesting because, when it comes to this whole idea of the feds wanting for the civil rights movement to stay intact, even going so far as to neutralizing and arresting individuals. I mean, of course, the FBI can't arrest anybody, but in those days, the whole idea was to go after organizations that were basically a threat to the American way of life. And communism from its very inception is a threat to Western civilization insofar that it envisioned a society that overthrew, world governments. I mean, they literally talked about this in their inception. And so it's not the same as, other political parties where people debate on public television or, in the public square. I remember there's a clip that, Paul Robeson, the singer, who is an avowed communist, basically made the point of saying, like, look, communism is the same as the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. We should have the right to just, express ourselves out loud. But the reality of it is, no, this is an ideology. This is a concept that seeks to basically overthrow not only the American Constitution, but also just our economy, our way of life, Christianity. It's very hostile to Christianity. And you can argue that the Democrat Party is doing that very same thing today, because they've been infiltrated by the communists. But one of the points that I make in the docuseries, just based upon my own findings from history, is that the communists actually infiltrated the Republican Party in the 1800s.
Yes.
And then by the time you get into the 1900s, they were able to infiltrate the Democrat Party even more. Mm-hmm. And this is why it's hard for me to become a flag waving partisan, because the more I dig into history and realize that it's not a matter of the party switching. That never happened. Right. What did happen is it's a matter of degree by which the the communists infiltrated this party or that party. If we're talking about during the war between the states era, there were a lot of genuine Bible-believing Christians who were abolitionists. However, there were politically interested people who were influenced by communist ideology, who made up what we call the radical Republican Party, who were within that radical Republican Party, people like Thaddeus Stevens and others. And a lot of these politicians and Union war generals were in correspondence with Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. There's a book called Letters to Americans, where some of those letters, you can read them. There's another book called Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels and the Civil War, where they were basically trying to, their whole idea was to use the issue of slavery, which was already on its way out due to industrialization and due to the fact that there were moral components to it and there were practical components to it, but slavery was on their way out. In fact, Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederate States, argued that they don't believe that slavery should exist in perpetuity, but they just wanted in the South the right to end slavery in the South in the same fashion and in the same way that it was able to be ended in the North, because slavery exists even still today, but it existed for all of human history. And this whole idea of living in a free market constitutional republic is a very new phenomenon. And I don't think people really respect how new of a phenomenon it is when you look at it with the backdrop of the grand course of human history. And so it's not something that you can just end in one fell swoop. It's something that takes kind of a gradual incremental thing. And the fact of the matter is the conditions for many Blacks in the South were much worse during Reconstruction after this full, broad sweep, ending of slavery. It was much worse during Reconstruction than it was during slavery. And that is, I think, a difficult thing for a lot of people to hear today, because, we are conditioned to think a certain thing, to believe a certain thing, but much of the education we get is geared toward having a statist kind of pro-civil rights mindset, such to where we're not able to think critically about what it actually takes to preserve our republic. When you look at history and you see, once again, the fact that many of our Union generals and politicians were working hand in hand with Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, not for the purpose of ending slavery, but rather for the purpose of helping to usher in the proletarian revolution. And they were able to implement a lot of their tactics and practices during the Reconstruction period, where Union war generals were literally pitting Black Southerners against white Southerners. I know what I'm saying sounds outrageous, but this history is there for everybody to view. And again, there's a lot of nuance to the whole kind of history of Democrats and Republicans. And I think we miss a lot because we always look at history through the lens of partisanship. And when we do that, that blinds us from being able to see the truth for what it is. That the reality is that it's bigger than Republican versus Democrat. It's literally good versus evil. And there has been figures, individuals in both parties historically who have worked to undermine our American Protestant Christian system and to push us more toward a secularist, confusing, globalist, Marxist society. And to the extent that we are at war, partisan war, and I know I'm on a tangent right now, but to the extent that we engage in, it's important to acknowledge that the modern iteration of the Democrat Party is demonic, it's evil, it's pushing abnormal ideas, and the Republican Party, by comparison, is the more conservative of the two-party system. And it's also important to note, to look at historically all of the things, all the nefarious things, all the wicked things that the Democrats were into. But the Republicans are not exactly exempt from getting a lot of scrutiny, as far as I'm concerned, because they were just as complicit in a lot of this stuff.
When you compare not just individuals, but where the party stands, the platforms, what the party says they stand for. Because right now, inside the state of Virginia, we just lost. We just got the party just got wiped out, and one of the reasons they did get wiped out because they had an openly gay guy running for lieutenant governor, and Glenn Youngkin saw it coming. He was the sitting governor as a Republican. He asked that guy to step down. He said, "This is going to be a drain on the ticket." He would step down. I think that he was, of course, an insurgent. And you got all of these people, these evangelicals here in this state that says, I'm not going to vote for a Republican ticket with some guy that's openly gay because it's an anathema to what we stand for. But again, they've accepted a lot of this stuff in their party. Mm-hmm. And you have a bunch of women over on the Republican side. You can't defund Planned Parenthood because they always vote against it. You have 5 or 6 women that are in the Senate who will not vote to defund Planned Parenthood because they stand with them. But even though you have these individuals that do this, the party platforms are kind of where I stand on the issue when it comes down to party, because the Republican Party is pro-life. They believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. Now, you'll have individual Republicans that do go against it. But at the end of the day, what you have with Black people is that they are always used as a political football. They will not stand up for their own individual rights. They try to stand as a collective, which, as you know, in the United States of America and in Christianity, you are judged by your own merit, yours. You look out for your wife and your family first, then you might go out into society and help somebody else. But first, what is my best interest? Mm-hmm. And we refuse to defend ourselves. Just like I said, we had 4 million slaves at the beginning of the Civil War, 4.55 million free whites down south. All the able-bodied men went to fight the war, and the Blacks stayed on the plantation. There you go. They didn't have a slave rebellion. You had a bunch of Union soldiers down here for 12 years.
I had family members who actually fought for the Confederate side of the army.
There it is.
Confederate side of the war.
Yeah, and those are facts we have to deal with, Chad. The fact that even 100 years after Civil War, we still allowed ourselves to be subdued by white men. Black men did. We wouldn't fight. We wouldn't defend our rights or our property. And the government, as you know, can only go so far. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the government is not at your front door keeping somebody from robbing you. It's you. You have to secure your rights. Our declaration says they secure these rights. They don't give you the rights. It's like you having money in the bank. The bank didn't give you the money. The bank secures the money for you. The money's still yours. And when you go to that bank to ask for your money, you are not begging for it. You're demanding it. I have my money here. I want it. Your rights are the same way. The government does not give you your rights. They secure your rights. They help you secure your rights. But at the end of the day, they're yours, and you have to do it. We refuse to do it then. We still refuse to do it now. We are the only people in America trying to give our guns up.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Right.
We got to get these guns off the street. What? You got the police chasing you, and yo, what? Okay, you're going to give your gun up to the man that's chasing you. Why don't you just blow your own brains out? It's the stupidest thing in the world.
Very stupid.
This is where I kind of come down on this, because the Democratic Party is always about giving up your weapon.
Right.
The Republicans say, no, we don't give up our weapons. So when I look at the two, with school choice, we have school choice in the plank. The Democrats are against it. We are pro-life. They are pro-abortion up to the 9th month. And you already know that 20 million Black children have been killed during abortion, over 65 million Americans. So when you look at the demonic tendencies of the parties and where they've stood since their inception, the Democratic Party has always been an evil institution. They have never not been an evil institution that haven't had death somewhere written into their party platform. Death written into it, whether it be slavery or whether it be abortion. They have death, murder written into their party platform. The Republican Party never had such a thing. They have taken God out of the public square in their public platforms. Have it taken out. The Republican Party has never done such a thing. So when you look at the two, and you're going to find some individuals every now and again that's going to come into the Republican Party acting fool and acting ignorant and doing this and all that. But when you look at the party platform itself and how it affects Christian Americans, the Democratic Party platform has been and still is an evil document. They are an evil institution. They've been the evilest institution in the history of the world. The party of perverts, liars, psychopaths, and anti-Christian bigots. And this is the reason why everywhere they rule, death, destruction, mayhem, trash, killing, fighting, terrible schools, family breakdown. It is worse than Haiti in a lot of these inner cities. Hell, it's worse than the Congo.
Yeah.
And they walk around acting like they're proud of it. We have to destroy this institution. We can't be ambiguous about it. We have to call evil evil, and we have to slit its throat.
Yeah. I hear exactly where you're coming from. I guess my thing is, I can look in history and find actually many Democrats who I think were patriotic, were pro-America. Martin Dice, for example, he was a East Texas Democrat who was for a time the chairman of the HUAC committee, and he was picking out communists and exposing communist infiltration in our government and in our institutions.
Yeah, but at that time they were still calling black people inferior, and they was talking about forcibly segregating people because of the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. Not people that want. I mean, you got some people that want to stay apart, but people that want to come together, forcibly segregate them because of color of skin, saying the most terrible things about black people as being inferior and the Negro race and they're not good enough to be around us. This was their platform during that time. And of course, you have one or two Democrats that will come in and say that, no, I don't agree with that. But the party itself, yeah, I mean, you had an Oscar Schindler inside the Nazi party, right? You don't have the oddman come out and say something there now and again. But the party itself has never, ever done anything to help black people. They've always tried to destroy it, and they've always had us under their control, and we've always been under their heel ever since their inception. They've had us under complete control, and we stayed at the bottom. These are facts. We've been about 10% of the black people have been part of Abraham Lincoln's party since its inception. But the vast majority, 90% of black people, have been under the control of the Democratic Party, and they have done nothing but put us in jail, destroy our families, take away our economic base, provide drugs and prostitution, hip hop music, take our guns away, bring drag queens and sex fiends in our schools. They're grooming our children now. Man, this is an evil institution, Chad. There's really no comparison between what the Democratic Party has done and the Virtual Party. Because the Republican Party has never had no control in the black community. Zero. It's been the Democrats, period.
Yeah. I take your point. I think for me, and this is why I appreciate talking to people like yourself, because you're somebody who have really looked into the history of partisanship in America. I mean, it shows in your books, and you have a lot of things that you revealed that I didn't even know. So I appreciate the conversation. But for me, the reason why my brain don't typically go to blaming the parties, even though the parties are like they bear a lot of blame. I'm not saying that I don't acknowledge their evil doing, specifically the Democrat Party's evil doing historically. I think that the Republican Party, as of late, is guilty of the sin of not doing enough, or of placating, or of.
They can't. Neither one can do anything for us. Like you said, it's a spiritual problem.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. My brain typically goes to a party like the Democrat Party can offer all these welfare policies and do all these things, but there has to be something culturally broken in order for a people to give in to the bait, to take the bait of what is being offered by these parties. And so for me, I think that the so-called black culture is actually more guilty than the Democrat Party, because why is it true that some of these other, ethnic groups are not, taking the bait in the same way that the so-called black community is?
Why? It was baked into the black communities in slavery. The Stockholm Syndrome was never ever allowed to be healed. When somebody's taken captive and they've fallen victim to Stockholm Syndrome, you have to take them out, and you have to take them away and isolate them from the people that was from the abuser, number one, and then you have to rehabilitate them. The Jews did that when it came down at the end of World War II. They took the Jewish people that had been in the concentration camps, and they took them from Germany and brought them into Israel, and they rebuilt them. We never did that in the South. Abraham Lincoln told us to do it. He said, go out west, go into Kansas, Nebraska, or I'll give you the state of Texas, but get away from these Democrats, because they are never going to give you any respite. We decided to stay on the plantation, and we're still yet on the plantation. And the iron triangle has been used by these white Democrats to keep us under control. They cannot live without us. These other minority groups, they didn't come over here and got attached to the white slave master like we did. They always kind of had their thing. The white Democrat slave master cannot exist in slavery or now without the black community. During the Jim Crow South, they needed us to pick cotton. Cotton pickers did not exist. We had to stay on the plantation. We were part of not only their culture, but their economic viability. Now they have to keep us for the votes. And so it's a situation where, I use this comparison. You have a house, you have two neighbors, one on one side, one on the other. One neighbor leaves you alone. If you want to rise, you'll let you rise. He's not going to bother you. You don't like you. He don't hate you. But you got one neighbor who is actually, he's invested in your failure. He's shooting in your house every night. He's burning up your house. He's trying to kill your children. He's raping your family. And people are telling me that I should be mad at the neighbor that won't bother me as much as I am about the guy that is actively trying to kill me. The Democratic Party is actively trying to destroy black people. Mm-hmm. They've always done it. They cannot survive without our vote. They cannot survive without keeping us under control. The Republican Party only gets 10% of our vote. They say, if you want to rise, rise. If you don't. We're not going to stop you. But the Democratic Party actively will keep people having school choice and keep your children in ghetto schools. They will actually have an abortion industry that will abort half of your children because the abortionists need the bodies. Mm-hmm. They actively need the ghettos to sell fentanyl and drugs in. They actually have to have it because if they don't keep the black people under control, they are dead. Mm-hmm. No options. The Republican Party can come and go with it. But if the Democratic Party can keep us under control, they are dead. So that's why the two parties, when it comes down to their subjugation of black people, one is invested in it. They cannot survive without it. They died this last election because they only got 80% of the black vote. They got to have 90. And they'll do everything they can to get it. And they've done it. But the Republican Party is saying, look, man, if you rise, cool. If you don't, cool. I don't care.
You know what?
Says, you cannot rise. It's like, we got to keep you on the plantation, man, or we die.
You know what, Vince? I'll tell you what I'll do. Because you're saying a lot of things that is really getting my mental juices flowing. And I think this is a conversation in itself that needs to be had. Yeah. And you're someone who I have a great deal of respect for. And that's an understatement.
Oh man, likewise. You know that, Ted. I'm the biggest fan.
And I think, I was about to say there's some things I disagree with, with some of the things that you just said, but it's not so much that I disagree with it. I think that it's more nuanced because it's like, you're absolutely right. When you look at the Democrat Party over the last 100 years, especially, I think if you go deeper into history from the days of Andrew Jackson, who started the Democrat Party, there's a lot of things that I think he did right. And to the extent that there's little points that need to be fleshed out or need to be debated, I'd rather have that conversation with you, someone I respect, versus, people who don't really know the history as much as you do and who can articulate your points as well as you do. So what I'll do is I'll try to find time to go up to Lynchburg here in the next few months. And I want to actually have a sit down conversation with you where we talk about the history of partisanship and the role that we as a people play in giving up or ceding or vesting our constitutional rights, our God-given rights to the Democrat Party, and what role has the Republican Party played? Because the thing about it, and this is the last point I'll make on this subject before we get back to the matter at hand, I think to the extent that we focus all of our attention, and again, I'm not caping for the Democrat Party, I'm not defending them, I'm not taking up for them, but what I'm saying is, when you look at the history of ideological subversion, controlled opposition, and psyops, I'm not so ready to not give the Republican Party the same manner of scrutiny that I give the Democrat Party, because I never know who's a friend and who's a foe. You mentioned the party platform earlier, and I agree with that. When you look at the platform, however, the platform is agreed upon by a committee of lay people who have conservative values. Those platform planks don't always translate to the actual politicians who are elected to legislate and to govern. And so there's this disconnect between the committees of people who make up the party platform and the politicians who are responsible for actually putting rubber to the road and implementing those policies and repealing many of the anti-American policies that are currently on the books. And so I think that to the extent that you have the politicians and their donors, they are in a sense laughing at us as true blue Americans who actually believe in this American way of life. They're laughing at us because they're taking advantage of our sensibilities, of our longings, our desires, our desire to preserve not only our Constitution, but Western civilization in itself. They're laughing at us as they line their own pockets, as they enhance their own power, but they can get on TV and say, I'm for family values, I'm anti-abortion, I'm this, I'm that, telling us the things we want to hear, when really many of them are just controlled opposition. So I know, like, for me, I can seem to be a little bit jaded or cynical when it comes to it, but it's like, to the extent that you study this stuff and see how it works, it kind of makes you lose interest in wanting to wave the flag for either party. But that's a conversation that I think it really requires about 2.5 hours of just talking about that. And I want to do it not virtually, but just you and I sitting down and having the conversation, or maybe someone like a April Chapman moderating it or something like that. Let's set that up. I really want to
look forward to it because it is something that I've been studying for a while. And when I look at, basic things like when you look at what has happened here in DC, and when you look at what happened in New Orleans when it comes to school choice and how it has changed the whole fabric of these cities and how these children are doing so much better, yet the Democrats can essentially fight against it. When you see that we're in a death spiral where our replacement rate should be at 2.1, we're at 1.6 and we've been there for 10 years and we're dying as a nation. When we see that Donald Trump came in and because of abortion, we're dying as a nation. Over 1 million a year. And they won't stop it. They're saying full speed ahead. When you see that Donald Trump came in the first month, stop illegal immigration, where Joe Biden lets close to 30 million illegals into this country. Why did he do it? Because the blue states are bleeding citizens and they're coming down south and we're getting the congressional districts now. And the blue states need more congressional districts, so they need more people. How do they get them? Not by not killing people, not by not aborting their babies, not by creating a society where you have jobs and people come up there. No, they do it by having sanctuary cities to bring illegal immigrants up there to be counted in the census. They allow fentanyl to come across that border, knowing that it's killing over 100,000 Americans a year. They know it. It's not a guess. They know it. These people know exactly what they're doing. You can go into any ghetto and you can see how they destroyed families. You see how these schools you got schools in Baltimore where the superintendent is getting $450,000 a year. And not one school, science, math, none of them are advanced in it, none of them. And yet they keep it going. They know exactly what they're doing. The stats exist. And so when we look at it, now we can assume that they're crazy or we can assume that they're not intelligent. Well, I see a bunch of Harvard and Yale people, and I've also read a lot of books from Cloward and Piven that says this is how you do it. This is how you keep them under control. This is how you use welfare to control the population. They know what they're doing. They're getting their results, and they ain't changing a thing. And to me, what is evil? Anyone who intentionally harms a child. Jesus Christ says anybody that harms one of these little ones, they better let a millstone be tied around their necks, they be thrown into the sea. But I hope they can swim.
Right. One of the debates that you often see online are people Republicans arguing that, Martin Luther King was a Republican. He was a conservative. He would be, clutching his pearls to see at what the Democrats are doing today. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
He'd be right with him, just like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and all the rest of his crew. You already know the history, Chad. This was planned They tried to take over the convention in 1968. All of these, they used the civil rights movement. All these communists, all these liberals, all these ne'er-do-wells and malcontents, they jumped into the civil rights movement and they rode its moral absolutism to take power from the Democratic Party. So after King got shot, they all went to Chicago and they tried to take over the Democratic Convention. And Mayor Daley and his hard hats beat them all down and ran them out of the convention center. They were hollering, the whole world is watching, the whole world is watching. They're bleeding and crying and stuff. And Saul Alinsky, who was there, came up to him and said, you got three choices. Either find a wailing wall and cry, start throwing bombs, and you'll turn everybody over to the GOP, or go and organize, and in 4 years, you come back and you be the delegates. 4 years they came back later in 1972, went to Miami, Florida, and they took over the Democratic Party. That's when the Democratic Party left from being a racist, ignorant, Klan member party to a sophisticated Marxist communist party in 1972. Jimmy Carter became president after that. America rejected him. Ronald Reagan took over. Reagan, Bush, 12 years. Clinton came in and tried to do it. He tried to go left. They beat him down, and Newt Gingrich took over the Congress. Bill Clinton turned back to the right. Bush came in, and you saw what happened with Bush. Everything was crazy with 9/11 and the housing crisis and all of this economic stuff. He didn't do too much. And then it all came together with Barack Hussein Obama. Obamacare, LGBTQ, government-funded sex change operations, and they've had it ever since then. And they hadn't let it go. And now we're catching on to what they're doing. But it started in 1972, and it's drip, drip, drip. You know what they say. Communists take over through revolution. Right. Socialists take over through what? Evolution. Mm-hmm. And this is what they're doing. They're evolving. They're taking their time. And now we look back over the years and we say, how the hell did we get here? To a $7.2 trillion budget where 40-something Americans are on SNAP, where Social Security benefits and disability benefits, our budget is exploding because we're taking care of people who no longer want to work. And we're becoming the communist, Marxist enclave, drip by drip, step by step, through tolerance and through our refusal to understand what Marxism and communism is.
Wow. 100%. Yeah. I mean, this whole idea that, Martin Luther King was a Republican is, I mean, I get it. People like Alveda King, who was his niece, and others, who's the other one? Angela Stanton King and others.
Yeah.
They say, well, he was a Republican. He was a registered Republican. First of all, they're basing that off of a 1955 registration card, but that doesn't actually mean anything because, as you well know, Vince, Martin Luther King never endorsed any president for political office other than LBJ, who was a Democrat. Mm-hmm. And not only that, he, even when his, MLK Sr., Daddy King, they called him, endorsed JFK, mm-hmm. King Jr. wanted to endorse him, but he was advised not to do so by none other than his handler, Stanley Levison, who said, no, you can't give off the impression that you belong to any party. Mm-hmm. You have to be construed as someone who is neutral, someone who's the moral leader of America. That's literally what they called him, the moral leader of the nation. Mm-hmm. And the idea was to chameleonize yourself in such a way that you're everybody's man, or you appear to be everybody's man. And not only that, I mean, I have right here on the record, I'm not going to play it now because I want to save it for season 2, but MLK, like actual video footage of him saying that, he suspects that blacks will vote for Democrats in droves because of his efforts with the civil rights movement. So this is something that he spoke about in a kind of gloating manner, King wanting, blacks by and large to vote for Democrats.
Well, that's weird to me, Chad, because you already know the history. You know that the first civil rights acts that were passed in the South since Civil War was passed by Eisenhower and Nixon. The 1957 Civil Rights Act and the 1960 Civil Rights Act. And because of those, the NAACP said that they registered millions of black people down South to vote, and they voted in the 1960 election. Matter of fact, my grandfather, Walter Clark, voted in the 1960 election for the first time. And he voted because the Civil Rights Division had been created in the 1957 and 1960 Civil Rights Act. The FBI could come down and investigate if the Democratic Party was keeping black people from voting. He had been kicked off the plantation in Hayward County, Tennessee, because he had registered to vote. And the FBI, he told me this story, came to his house and said that President Eisenhower sent us here. We heard you were kicked off the plantation for voting. And he said, yeah, they told me I had to move. They said, well, you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay right here. And Daddy Walter, he said that President Eisenhower and President Nixon sent us here to tell you you don't have to go anywhere. And my grandfather tells me this story, but guess what happened? When he voted in 1960, he voted for Kennedy and he voted for Johnson. You know why he did it? Because the culture said so. It's the same reason they did it back in 1876 after the Civil War. It was when Samuel J. Tilden ran against Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes was the governor of Ohio. He had been a Union general. He got shot 5 times in the war freeing black people. Comes time to vote in Mississippi and South Carolina, they put together the Mississippi-South Carolina plan, where they bribed, intimidated black people, and then they ran off all the scallywags and carpetbaggers or killed them. And black people voted for the Democratic Party because the whole South went blue. South Carolina had 3 times more black men than white men in it. And 101% of all registered votes went to the Democratic Party. 101%. So they basically voted, they went a little too crazy in South Carolina. Mississippi had 2 times more black men than white men. And Mississippi went blue. And that's when the Republican Party went down there and said, no, there's some shenanigans going down here. We don't believe these. We don't believe these numbers. We're not going to allow it to happen. South Carolina said, we'll start the Civil War again if you don't take these numbers. And Rutherford B. Hayes made a deal. He said, okay, give us your electoral college vote, South Carolina and Mississippi, and we'll end Reconstruction. It makes perfect sense to me, because if you had a Civil War that cost about $3.5 trillion, and then you've had a Reconstruction for 12 years, and then at the end of the day, black men are going to vote for the Democratic Party to put them back in charge of the South, let them be with their masters. Yeah. They've never not voted for the Democratic Party. They've always voted for them every chance they've gotten. Why? For the same reason they vote for them now. They love their master, period. It's Stockholm Syndrome, and they will never leave their master until we get to the younger people like yourself and you and Chuck, and you guys doing a great job educating the young people. And this is the reason why so many of them turned against the Democratic Party in this last election. Is the work that you're doing, is the education you're giving them, and the young are much easier to cure than the old people are.
Yeah, I think even the piece that you mentioned about Nixon and Eisenhower it requires a bit of nuance, because even though they were Republicans, Eisenhower was an admirer of FDR, who was a raging socialist, and Nixon supported universal basic income and wealth redistribution policies. But
here's the thing, though. Here's the point I was making. If black people were going to vote because of civil rights, after the Little Rock 9 incident, when Eisenhower was sent down the 101 Airborne to integrate Central High School inside of Little Rock, Arkansas, and then he signed the 1957 and the 1960 Civil Rights Act. If they were going to vote in 1960 based upon civil rights, when they voted for Eisenhower and Nixon, when they voted for Nixon over Kennedy, who fought against those acts, who did nothing for civil rights. I mean, if you were going to vote for civil rights, if that was your issue, since they're saying that they voted for Johnson because of civil rights, but why didn't they vote for Nixon because of civil rights? He had done more because, and I think you know this, that when you look at the 1964 election, all right, 80% of black people voted for Johnson and Kennedy in 1960. 80%, even though they didn't do anything for civil rights. Nixon had. So the civil rights argument falls on his face. Plus, in the 1964 election before the 1965 Voting Rights Act, more black people as a percentage of the population, voted in 1964. The only time it had ever more black people voted in a percentage in the United States of America when they voted for about Barack Obama in 2007. It was the highest percentage of black people ever voting in the history of this nation, 1964. This was before the 1965 Voting Rights Act. These people voted because of what Nixon and Eisenhower did. Civil rights was never the reason black people voted. Black people voted then the same way they vote now. They vote for the D. They don't care who's running. They've always done it. They always will do it until we find a way to re-educate them and change their mind. They never not voted for the Democratic Party.
I didn't realize I was muted. My apologies. So we were talking about King and the civil rights movement and what party he belonged to. And the reality of it is that he belonged, like he considered himself a democratic socialist.
Yes.
He, as you well know, I mean, when you look at the minutes from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference meetings, he was advocating for democratic socialism. When you listen to the testimonies of those who were a part of his staff or the testimonies that they have written about King.
I remember Cornel West even saying it to Tucker Carlson on Tucker Carlson's show. Yeah. I was watching it live.
Right.
And he was trying to, because, Cornell's a democratic socialist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Cornell made the point. Tucker said, Martin Luther King Jr. was a democratic socialist.
Right.
And Tucker said, I didn't know that. And I said, well, I took note of that. It was 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the same was said by James Cone, who wrote the book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree. He's a so-called father of Black liberation theology, which is rooted in Marxism. And King himself advocated for democratic socialism. When you read his own writings, I forget which volume it is. It might be volume 6.
Well, David Garrow said the same thing.
Volume 1 or 2. Yeah.
He said the same thing. He said that Martin Luther King told them to turn off their tape recorders. He said, I don't want this to get around, but we got to, we have to do some type of democratic socialism here in the United States of America.
Right.
Yeah, he talked about it openly.
Yeah. He said that he believes that the day is coming when labor will help get a man into the White House who will push redistributive policies, a centralization of industry, basically Marxism. Yeah. And he doesn't know what this new order will be called, but he said it will be the end of capitalism. He said, I don't know if it'll be called communism or socialism or democratic socialism, but then he says that it doesn't matter what it will be called. It doesn't make a difference. He says a rose called by any other name smells just as sweet. This is what Martin Luther King said.
Yeah.
So this idea of democratic socialism, we talked earlier about, denying one's affiliation with communism. And this hasn't gone away. The reason why it's necessary to talk about these things historically is because they are still happening today. So I wanted to actually play this clip to try to modernize the conversation. Where'd it go? Let's see here. Let's play this one.
All right. You are a self-described democratic socialist. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city and across our state and across our country. And I look forward to work with everyone, including billionaires, to make a city that is fairer for all of them.
Well, let me ask you about what Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has had to say. He's had a lot to say about your campaign. He called you a communist. Because he's the president, I want to give you a chance to respond directly to him. How do you respond? Are you a communist?
No, I am not. And I have already had to start to get used to the fact that the president will talk about how I look, how I sound, where I'm from, who I am, ultimately because he wants to distract from what I'm fighting for. And I'm fighting for the very working people that he ran a campaign to empower, that he has since then betrayed. And when we talk about my politics, I call myself a democratic socialist in many ways inspired by the words of Dr. King from decades ago, who said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There has to be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And as income inequality has declined nationwide, it has increased in New York City. And ultimately, what we need is a city where every single person can thrive.
So, I see people in the comment section calling Mamdani a liar. And I'm assuming that they're saying, based upon this idea of him saying that I'm not a communist, when in fact he is a communist. But whenever he ties it back to King, he's absolutely telling the truth.
Yes, he is.
And it's interesting because when that clip went viral, people are like, "Oh, how dare you, compare yourself to King?" These were Republicans saying this. How dare he compare himself to King? King would be rolling over in his grave. No, he wouldn't.
No, he wouldn't.
Mamdani is carrying on the tradition of King, and the fact that New York City elected this man mayor shows you that the efforts of King were effective insofar that after he was assassinated, there was a propaganda campaign to basically sanitize the image of the civil rights movement, to make King appear to be larger than life, even though he was anti-American, anti-Christian, anti-decency, quite frankly. He advocated in that speech, the I Have a Dream speech, of being judged by the content of one's character, when his character was completely flawed. And that's putting it lightly.
Yeah.
But the efforts were effective because one of the things that King had that his adversaries didn't have, and when I say adversaries, I'm not talking about white folks, I'm talking about black folks, black people within the church like Joseph H. Jackson, who are trying to warn the church in America at large about the Marxist undercurrents of the civil rights movement. He was trying to do that in real time. And when you look at the popularity ratings of Jackson compared to King, Jackson was far more popular than King. But one of the things that King had that Jackson didn't is a press made up of fellow travelers who were communist sympathizers, who went out of their way to make King appear to be larger than life. I mean, when you look at his face being plastered on the cover of Life magazine, on the cover of Time, all of these spreads about him in very popular publications across the country. When you look at the way that they were able to market and produce the March on Washington, the idea was to really kind of put him on this pedestal, much the same as what they did with Mamdani these days. I mean, you couldn't turn on the television without seeing his face. He was going on The View. He's going on a lot of popular podcasts. He was, they were making it out to be this thing where he's just the greatest thing to grace us in the modern times, and he's going to turn New York around, and he's going to do all the things. And it became such to where Cuomo looked like the conservative, and Cuomo is anything but a conservative. It's very fascinating. And so the reason why it's necessary to do a project like the MLK Project, to write the kind of books that you wrote, to do the films like you did, Would You Go to Hell for Me? The reason why it's necessary to do this isn't to, cause people to look back in history and hate people, but rather to understand the fact that this Trojan horse is very much still erected today.
Yes.
And it's permeating our culture in so many ways, in our institutions, such to where New York City, the most famous city in the world, literally elected a communist as mayor. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, man, they're very good at recruiting. They recruited AOC. You know the story behind they recruited her. It was central casting. The same thing with Mamdani, the same thing with King. When Baird Rustin saw Martin Luther King, he knew he was magic, and he was charismatic. He was a good-looking guy, had a beautiful wife. He had gone to Ivy League school. He had this ability to talk to the highest person up on Wall Street, or go down and talk to the field man in the field. He could give the most intelligent speech you could ever hear, and he could go down into a Baptist church and he could just growl and just give the gospel and do the fire and brimstone speech. He could do it all. He was a master at it, and he was great for central casting. And they chose well, like they did Mamdani. But what they gave away with King was this. When I went down to see his monument, before I really knew who he was, and I noticed immediately that there was nothing that mentioned he was a reverend, nothing that mentioned the SELC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Nothing that mentioned God anywhere on that monument. And I said, I wonder why. And I understood after learning about him, I said, this was not a mistake. This was a confession. The black preachers could have raised some hell because they got the drum major quote wrong, and they rubbed it off and put the proper quote on because Maya Angelou called Barack Obama and told him this quote is wrong. And I believe that if just a few black preachers that had known King said, you need to put up that he was a reverend, you need to put some of these quotes from the Bible that he put on, they didn't do any of it because they are now telling America just who King was. He was not a reverend. He did not believe in God. He was not a Christian. And when you look at the black community and where it is, it tells a whole story. A tree is known by the fruit it bears. Jesus Christ said, how do you know a false prophet? You will know it by the fruit. Same as you know a tree. You want to get good fruit from a bad tree, bad fruit from a good tree. Each tree and its fruit be after its own kind. And the black community is at the bottom of every socioeconomic statistic in America, yet they celebrate him. Why? Because we vote the way they want us to vote. We vote for Marxists and communists. And in the United States of America, the richest country in the world, the black community is a Marxist communist enclave in this oasis of freedom and economic prosperity. Who put it there? The Black Caucus, the Iron Triangle, the Civil Rights Movement. In 1956, in his book, American and King Years, Taylor Branch wrote that the Comintern told their insurgents in the Civil Rights Movement that they wanted to make the black community a direct replica of the Soviet Union. They've accomplished it. State education, dictator worship, one-party rule, poverty, economic distress, crime, all of it. We look like Western Germany before the Berlin Wall, and they're proud of it. Why? Because they keep power. In the same way that those Stalinists and those communists would stand on the communist wall and wave at the poor people down there at the bottom, dying with their teeth falling out, but they were doing well, and they were celebrating their victories and over all of the Nazis and whatnot. They're living well, but the rest of the people are living like peasants. So it's the same thing with the Black Caucus in the Iron Triangle. They live well. The rest of the black community live like peasants. And they say it's a victory. Why? Because they have power. And they've taken the black community and they've addicted them so hard to government that when the SNAP benefits get pulled away, the people got to steal because they can't fend for themselves. They made them slaves again. And just like every slave, most of them are afraid to run off that plantation because they know they don't know how to fend for themselves. And they'll take abuse, they'll take mistreatment because they are afraid. But you and I know that in Jesus Christ, there is no fear. He told us 365 times in the Bible to fear not. He told us, I got you. We have to step out on faith. And when we start believing in him, we'll defeat these people because communism and Marxism and socialism get their power from one thing, that is fear. And fear does not come from God. It comes from Satan.
100%. 100%. So we're actually going to, land the plane here. And there's so much more I want to talk about. But I think that you and I want to actually go up to Lynchburg, Virginia, and sit down with you. Hopefully we can get Chuck out there. And
that'd be great. I'd love to meet Chuck. Tell Chuck I'm a fan, man. I love his stuff.
Okay. Yeah. But I like for myself, you, Chuck, and April to all sit down and have a sit-down conversation, maybe a 3 hour.
Let's get some cigars and some bourbon. None for April, okay? Because if April already wild enough, you give April something to drink, she might just set the whole place up. We'll sit back and get some cigars and some bourbon, sit back and talk, have a great conversation, and we'll have April keep all us alpha males.
Hey,
she's the alpha, as you know.
I'm game. But I think we should have like a 3 hour conversation on just history and partisanship and black culture's role in all of it.
Oh, it'd be great. It'd be fun.
Communism.
I'd love to do that.
Let's set that up. Let's not let that die in the water.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, this MLK project is something that when you look at it in tandem with "Will You Go to Hell for Me," and the work that you're doing, the great work that you're doing, the necessary work that you're doing, I think that there's a tide shift at work. It's interesting because when we released Uncle Tom and Uncle Tom 2, we did Uncle Tom in 2020, Uncle Tom 2 in 2022. I remember that whenever we would go on tour and screen the film across the country, these were mostly conservative audiences made up of white people, mostly white people. And one of the questions that we would often get during the Q&A is, how do we get Black people to see this? And I remember my answer being, it's none of my concern. Yeah, it's certainly not my wheelhouse. I'm not a distributor. I'm not a marketer. All I can do is produce films. That's really all I can do. And we delegate those things to other people. And I took this position that all I can do is be faithful. All I can do is do the work, make the films, do the projects, and do it in as honest a way as I possibly can. And to the extent that I do that, those who are supposed to see it will see it. And when I tell you that within the past month, I had over 150,000 new subscribers on Instagram.
Wow.
And most of those were Black men.
Wow. Good. Wow. That's amazing.
So to the extent that you stop focusing on, man, I have to cater it and urbanize it, get it to Black people. No, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. Just build it, stay the course, be sure-footed and steadfast. And to the extent that you're putting God first, the Bible says that his word will not return to him void. It will accomplish what he set out for it to accomplish.
Chad, he will not give you a vision without provision. He'll open every door, close the ones you're not supposed to have. What you're doing is going to last forever. Can't be erased. God put it on your heart to do it. The work you put into it, the research you put into it, the bravery that you've shown by doing it in this climate, and what it's going to bring forth, because people are going to use this. Homeschoolers are going to use this in their schools to teach their children. They're going to put this thing in private schools. People are going to watch it because it is factually correct. They're going to check everything you put down there. They will say, oh my God, it's true. You want them to check it. Please check it.
Yeah.
Because you say it's right. And when you check it, you're going to have to deal with it. And then when you got to deal with it, it's like what C.S. Lewis had to deal with when they told C.S. Lewis, right, he's an atheist. They said, and finally they said, look, Tolkien said, you're going to have to deal with this. Jesus Christ was either who he said he was, the Son of God, or he was a lunatic. He wasn't a great teacher. He wasn't this magnificent historical Jewish figure. He was a freaking lunatic, or he was who he said he was. Decide. And so C.S. Lewis had to deal with it. He had to come and agree he was who he said he was.
Right.
You're putting this out there and telling people, I know what you've heard. Martin Luther King Jr. was either I don't know, either the greatest charlatan in the history of the world, or everybody's lying on him.
Right.
He was a hoe chaser. He was a drunk. He used drugs. He was into orgies. He was not a Christian. He plagiarized his doctorate at Boston University, so he wasn't a real doctor. I mean, the guy, everything about him was fake. He was a paper tiger inside of a paper tiger. Where did he come from? He was raised in Stanley Levison and the Communist Party machine. And they duped us all. And I was duped for a very long time.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you and I got in common, Chad, there's a penalty when you lie to the strong. You can lie to most people. They say, well, but when you lie to people like me and you, no, you got to stand and account for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to accept you making a fool out of me.
Right.
And I was a fool for 40 years of my life. And then I figured it out. So now, just like Paul on the road to Damascus, Paul was just that guy, wasn't he? He was a Jew and a Pharisee. He was a 100% Jew Pharisee. And when he became a Christian, became 100% on that side.
Right.
So that's how you and I are. We were this way, but when we found the truth, we're going to be that way with the truth too.
Exactly.
So like you, I'm telling everybody I can, and anybody that want to debate it, let's talk about it. And if you want to go to the streets, fine. I'll break a bottle. We'll get in an alley. We'll have an alley fight. I'm not scared of y'all. bunch of ankle grabbing punk. They make me sick, man. I seek them out for a fight, and they run because they can't defend themselves. So I'm with you. When I met you, I saw you was bigger than me, and I was happy about that, Chad, because you might have to use that pretty soon, all right? You and Chuck might have to break some bottles ourselves, but hey, I'm down. Let's get down with it.
What's that guy's name? He's a black pastor. He was in Trump's circle during the first term.
John Amachukwu?
Nah.
Pastor Wooden?
No. He's the one that tried to go after Charlie Kirk when Charlie Kirk was blowing the lid off of King.
Daryl Scott.
Daryl Scott.
Yeah.
You got time to talk about
wave gap all the time.
You got time to talk about the friendly fire? Man. When you look at people like Daryl Scott.
Yeah, Daryl Scott and his crew got mad because me and Charlie, Charlie gave me an hour on King's birthday to just go to town on him, right? And I did. Charlie just kind of asked questions. And I got a call from Charlie and said, Vince, man, Daryl Scott, man, they called Trump and told us we have to apologize. And I said, I ain't apologizing. And I thought you not to either. And I told him, this is what you do. You tell Donald Trump, to tell Daryl Scott them that if they try to come after you, I'm coming after them. Told him I'm going to tell him that he's part of the Iron Triangle. He's a liar. He's a poverty pimp. And that if you want to come, and I'm going to come on your show instead, I'm going to go on Hannity instead, I'm going to go on Tucker Carlson, I'm going to say it. And the next thing I know, Charlie calls me back and says, hey, man, they backed down. And that's why when you saw me, I had a video of him and I shaking hands. The last time I saw him, I hugged him. He said, hey, Vince, you had my back when nobody else did. That's what he's talking about. I told him, you stand strong. You'll tell them the truth. I'm going to be with you. And we made him back down. And that's what I'll do for you. You have some trouble, you call me, Chad, I'll be right there to stand with you. If it's 100 jokers, it'll be me and you standing there fighting. And when you got the truth behind you, and when you're ready to go into battle, I'm with you. And this is a fight that needs to be had. We are Americans, but we're also Black Americans, and we see what this lie is doing to people that look like us. We know they're coming after our children. We know they're going to come after our brothers and sisters. And then we know that they're coming after America. And this is where we all live. And if your neighbor's house is burning, you better go help put out the fire because it's going to spread to yours. Right now, me and you, we're doing fine. Our families are fine, but our neighbors' houses are burning. And it's coming toward us. And we're smart enough to try to stop this fire before it gets to us. Absolutely.
I mean, Daryl Scott, he's somebody who calls himself a conservative, but yet, whenever you and Charlie were exposing the truth about who King was, Daryl Scott went on to Roland Martin's show and is yucking it up with him, kikiing with him.
Yeah. Always got to circle the wagons, to protect this apostate clergy that the Black community has led us down at the bottom where all these guys are riding around in big cars and having big houses. The Black community is dying. And I ain't talking about figuratively dying. It is literally dying under the auspices of this Iron Triangle, this Black preacher, Black politician, and these Black civil rights workers. And, there's a special place in hell for them. They're just like the Pharisees and the Sadducees of old. And God's going to deal with them.
Yeah. And there are other so-called conservatives. I mean, just yesterday, somebody did a live stream about me because I reposted a reel from about a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago, where I was debating this woman over the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Mm-hmm. And I said that it was unconstitutional law.
Yes.
Because people understand that the Constitution doesn't tell you what your rights are. Mm-hmm. The Declaration of Independence acknowledges that your rights are natural rights that come from God himself.
Exactly.
The Constitution is meant to restrict government power.
That's right.
The Constitution is for the government.
Right.
To not overstep and to not infringe. And so what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did is it expanded government power. That's what every legislation does. Yeah. It either expands power or rolls back power. Mm-hmm. It's a mandate for the government, not so much for the people.
It almost overrode the whole Constitution.
Right. And so what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did is in keeping with Marxism, because when you look at Marxism, what does it seek to do? A number of things, but particularly centralizing power into the government. Mm-hmm. It seeks to infringe upon and do away completely with the individual ownership of property, and to centralize industry, the economy, work, centralize it into the hands of the government for the people, right?
All under the auspices of equality.
So when you look at what the Civil Rights of 1964 did in effect, particularly Titles 2 and 7, is it gave the government, the federal government, a right or the power to dictate your hiring practices as a small company, who you serve as a company, right? And the reality of it is, I mean, as hard as it is for people to hear, if I went and I started a company, I put in my money, my blood, sweat, and tears to start this company, all the government does is tax me for something that it didn't put in on.
Right.
But I should have the right to hire whom I please, not hire who I don't want to, serve whom I please, not serve who I don't want to. And to the extent that people take issue with that, they can simply choose not to patronize my business, to instead patronize my competitors. And the free market will rule out those whose values are not compatible with their own.
There it is. You hit it right on the head. And the free market will determine it, like they determine in the NFL right now. They don't say you got to have so many black and white players. They have to win. I don't care how racist you think that white man is. He's not going to let the color of your skin get between him making a profit.
Right.
If you can make money for him. Now, what we want to do, Chad, we want to make them love us. Well, our Christian faith tells us we're not supposed to be concerned about that. We're supposed to love them. If they don't love us, that's their problem.
Right.
My problem is to love you whether you love me or not. That's true Christianity.
Right.
My job is to assist you whether you love me or not. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to let you be, I'm your pinata, where you can beat me and hurt me and slap me around. No, that's not true Christianity. But my job is to love you. And Jesus tells us that. And so I'll show you the true face of Christianity by saying, well, you won't let me move in your neighborhood. We'll make a better neighborhood. And then you can move into mine if you want. If you don't want me eating at your restaurant, I'll build a better restaurant. And then you can come to mine. And we win their hearts. We transform them through the Christian religion, not through the law.
Through the reformative the Christian faith. Not through
the Christian faith. We do it through showing the face of Jesus. And that's how we've changed the world, not by going to Caesar, but by doing the hard work of going into the streets and showing them who we are, letting our light shine, so men might see your good works and glorify the Father which is in heaven. But that was just a little bit too slow for them. They wanted to be accepted by racists. They wanted racists to love them.
Right.
A guy like you and I would say, if you don't want me working for you, dude, I don't want to work for you. Why the hell would I want to work for a racist? And have him mistreat me all while I'm there? Why would I want to trade and give money to a racist? Why would I do that? It makes no sense to me. And it has not done the black community any good whatsoever. We're still at the bottom of it. Now, if we were where the Jewish community was, and the Indian community, and the Asian community, I said, well, the civil rights movement worked. That Martin Luther King Jr. was a genius. We're still at the bottom and still trying to say that there was some virtue in that movement.
No.
5 times more men in prison. AIDS, killing black men. The black family destroyed. The economic structure of the black community destroyed. Educational system destroyed. Christianity is now apostate. And yet we celebrate the civil rights movement.
Yeah, you got your symbol. You lost your family, you lost your community, you lost your virtue and your dignity, but you have your symbol. You have the civil rights movement. You have a 40-foot statue in Washington, D.C. and a national holiday each year, but you lost your dignity.
Lost it all.
Good grief. But yeah, I mean, and the interesting thing about it is, unfortunately, most Americans are ignorant to the distinction between desegregation and forced integration.
Correct.
The rights movement was about forced integration.
Exactly.
It can be argued, and I even argue, that counties and states implementing segregation, telling businesses that you have to have a door for blacks and a door for whites, that's unconstitutional. I can see that argument, and I agree to that argument.
Yes.
But to the extent that those laws exist, you undergo the reformative work of desegregation, of making it clear that if you are a business owner, you have the right, you have the freedom of association. You can hire whom you please, you can serve whom you please, but the state doesn't have the right to dictate those matters for you. So what we did with the civil rights movement is we replaced one tyrant for another.
Yes.
We replaced the tyranny of the states who were forcing segregation with the tyranny of the federal government, who gave the government the power to tell to tell businesses, you have to hire everybody in indiscriminate of race. You have to serve everybody indiscriminate of race. That's just as tyrannical and just as unconstitutional.
Okay, Chairman, just like the Montgomery bus boycott, the bus station didn't want the separation. They told the city of Montgomery, look, man, why don't you just let the people come on? You're messing with our bottom line. And it was the city of Montgomery that enforced it. Most of the time when you dealt with these private businesses, they didn't want to have to deal with those ordinances because they wanted money. They didn't care anything about black doors and white doors and black and white. They said, look, man, why don't you guys cut this mess out and let us just make money? And it was these city councils and a lot of these crazy people in government that pressed this thing. The businesses wanted it gone. And when it left, I mean, the people down south started making money hand over fist. This guy told this story, the guy that was over Birmingham Steel. He was over in, I think it was Japan, trying to get a deal made for them to buy their steel. And he said he's over there, and they were fighting, raising hell in the streets of Birmingham. King was in Birmingham, and the deal fell through. And he called back angry and said, man, you guys got to cut this mess out down south. You're killing us. So the people down south, the businessmen, like you said, they saw that their bottom line did not like forced segregation. They didn't like it. They wanted desegregation, and then they would have had the right to choose who they wanted, to associate with whomever they choose, whomever they chose to choose to work for them. But then, of course, it's who was holding the gun, right? The civil rights community said, we have the gun now you have to do what we say. And that was equally as bad. Right.
Yeah, this person who did the live stream saying that I was wrong was saying that I'm wrong because of the golden rule, treating others how you wish to be treated. And I don't know if this person was being just obtuse or if they were being disingenuous, because as a Christian, yes, I apply the golden rule. But we're talking about whether a policy is constitutional or unconstitutional. The reality of it is, if we have the freedom of association, it is thus unconstitutional for the government to step in and force businesses to do things against their will.
Just that simple.
We know that free will.
Like it, but this is how it is. You cannot force, you shouldn't be able to force anybody to be in your presence that don't want to be in your presence. Again, it has to be mutual. You have to want it and they have to want it. If not, it's called stalking.
Right.
I don't want you around me. Well, I want to be around you. Man, you better get the hell away from me. I ain't playing with you. I mean, it becomes that. And so for two people to come together, they have to mutually agree that we both want to be here at the same time. If one of them refuses, the whole thing falls apart. And the government came in, and again, Chad, you already know this. What they did really was, especially when it came to hiring, it's just all it's all an illusion. They just can't tell you why they're not hiring you now.
Right.
They still won't do it. They just won't tell you. And the whole thing about forcing businesses to accept you, that was so stupid because, as you said, economics was going to determine that.
Right.
If this white man started losing enough black money, he'd change his ways, and vice versa with black people that won't allow white people to come to their businesses. Money is green, and people usually don't care as long as you come spend it. And it would have fixed itself, as it always does in laissez-faire economics. The invisible hand always rules.
Right. And then lastly, I hate that I'm even bringing this up, but there's this clout chasing YouTuber. I'm not even going to mention his name. But he has reacted to some of your content as well as some of mine. And he calls himself a conservative, calls himself a Christian. and he is perturbed by the fact that we are daring to question the legacy of King. And what's interesting is whenever he first came across my radar, somebody shared one of his videos with me. I went to his page and saw that he had a relatively large following. And I was like, okay, this is somebody who I can, reach out to, and we can have a conversation. We can have a debate. But then I started to notice something interesting. His videos, even though he has a large following, barely have any engagement. In fact, most of his videos don't have any engagement at all. And I put 2 and 2 together, and somebody told me he actually buys his subscribers.
Wow.
They're not real followers. They're people that, they're bots that he bought to make himself look larger or bigger than what he actually is. And to the extent that he makes videos going after certain people like you and me, he does so to try to increase his own relevancy, to try to grow his own clout. I was like, okay, well, that's fine. But what are his actual arguments? I listened to his arguments. He said that, well, King wasn't a philanderer and a womanizer, and he wasn't sleeping around because Coretta Scott King said that he wasn't. His wife said that he wasn't. It's like the whole point in sleeping around is to try to hide it from your wife. That is an argument that my 5-year-old can easily debunk or easily refute. So his arguments are very sophomoric. They are not even worth engaging. But it's interesting to see those kind of clout chasers coming for folks like yourself and me. Do you have any thoughts?
Have you noticed nobody wants to debate you straight up? Because they know you will destroy them. They'll throw out their little jabs. They'll say what they want to say. But when it comes time to mic up and come up with Chad Jackson, they run. And they run because they know your facts are your facts. People are caught up in their feelings, and they're caught up in their emotions, and they're children. They're not men. Men are logical. Information should be able to change your mind if you are a man. Now, if you are a child, that's different. You're emotional, and I can't stand emotional men. Men have to be logical. They have to sit down, they have to reason together. This is how we make decisions. But too many of these men have been raised by their mamas now. And they're emotional, they get in their feelings, they get into their cognitive dissonance, and they start crying. Like you knew Martin Luther King Jr. And the dude been there almost 60 years. You didn't know him. You're caught up in your emotions, and you are not man enough to change direction. And this is the problem that we have with these so-called men. So like when Jesus talked to the rich young ruler is talking to God. And God said, I tell you, I can get eternal life, man. Sell everything you got and come follow me. Come follow God, okay? He said, hell with you, man. What the? You can't save these people, man. You can't do it. If this dude will turn away from God and live forever, and Jesus didn't chase him.
Right.
He said, if you come across the town that will not accept your ministry, shake the dust off your feet.
Right.
Just leave them. And right now, I found that to be true. Like you, people like to talk. People like to say this and say that. But when it comes time to face Vince Everett Ellison or Chad Jackson, watch them run.
Watch them run.
Because they know that we have our facts and we're not scared.
Running for the hills.
They get on the camera with me and you, we're going to cut their throats figuratively and watch them bleed out.
There you go. There you go. And pray for you while we do it.
Yes, and smile.
Let's get to some of these questions. Dora Johnston, how do we work for change in our communities, advocating for preservation of our constitutional republic?
You know what, man? I believe that I believe the sunlight is the best disinfectant. What you're doing right now, Chad, and what I'm doing and going around the country doing it, putting on YouTube, is the best thing we could do. Technology finally caught up with us. You know, beforehand, you had to beg the powers that be to get on television. You had to beg CBS, CNN. You had to beg Simon Schuster to do a book. But now we can just get on the mic and we can be seen all over the world. Get our information straight, confront, challenge, and you'll see that intelligent people will come. Jesus said what? My sheep will hear my voice. Yeah, there may be some people you talk to, they can just walk away. Forget them. I mean, the children of Israel saw God split the Red Sea, do the 10 plagues, everything, and some of them still bow to the golden calf. Some people you're not going to help. We'll pray for them. We'll pray for them. Send them on their way. Just like they said, some people are going to hate black people. They're going to hate God for making black people. And we can't be concerned about those. Some people are going to stay in the plantation. They're going to love their master. If he beats them, if he chokes them, they will kiss them with their dying breath. Can't help them. What we do is tell the truth. Like you said, Chad, put it out there. The people that want the truth will find it. Ignorance today is optional. And if you want to watch booty shaking videos and Cardi B all day long, I can't help you. But if you go out there and you just Google the truth about Martin Luther King Jr., Chad Jackson and Vince Ellison just might shoot up. And now you got some information to deal with. So we're going to put it out there, and we're going to put it out there for people that want it to find it. But the people that do not want it, there's nothing we can do to help them.
Right. Yeah. And when you think of the people like the clout chasing YouTuber whom I mentioned earlier, if his arguments were sound, then maybe, just maybe, people will start following him for real instead of the bots. Exactly. But the fact that he feels like he has to try to attack me and you in order to be relevant.
Look, we don't need bots, Chad. I'm about to hit 100. I'm about to hit 100K. I might hit it today. Some subscribers. I did it in less than 2 years, and I did it by grinding, just like you did. And usually takes people about 6-7 years to do it. I did it in less than 2. April Chapman is my brand manager. She produces my show. We grind out every day. We put out good content, just like you, and that's how you get a channel up. People talk about your channel. They share it. The people come and they watch it over and over again. I get close to 1 million views per month. April gets over that. You get hundreds of thousands of views per month, and you get so many on Instagram they can't count them, and TikTok. So we're out there doing the hard work. We don't have to fake anything. And then we challenge people with our content every day. Prove me wrong. And they can't. Right. And because of that, we're changing the culture.
Right.
The Black community for the first time went only 80% for the Democratic Party, and it crushed them. And now we're bleeding more and more from them. And sooner or later, the Democratic Party will have to change or they're going to die. That's what we want. We want the competition. So we put the information out there and people respond to it.
Right. 100%. We got a super sticker from ALL Production. Thank you. Another one, $5 from Coffee 19. Thank you. Another question from Leslie. What does the King family think of this movie? I guess they're talking about the MLK Project as well as your film, the one that you did. Will you go to hell for me?
I've heard crickets. I've heard nothing from them at all. Matter of fact, Chad, like you, I've gotten very, very little negative pushback from it, because when people want to push back on it, they will check it and say, "Oh my God, it's true." Everywhere I've had it played, like your movie, I've played it up here. It's just these two very, very divergent situations. I had it played in Lynchburg, Virginia. Well, Lynchburg, Virginia is just basically almost like 95% white. Most of the people, 90% of the people in the audience were white people. Standing ovation at the end. Played in Atlanta, Georgia. April set it up. Black people. I mean, I'm talking about maybe 99% of the people in the place was black. Standing ovation. Same thing. Played it in Durham. Bishop Wooden was there. Whole audience was basically black. Standing ovation at the end. It's just the truth no matter who hears it. And I sat back and I asked questions afterward. And the questions I answer all of them. It's just the truth is the truth. You don't have to dance and slide and hide. As I tell people, I was 4 years old when King died. I got my information from all of these sources who are liberal. David Garrow, Tyler Branch, Ralph Abernathy's book. You talked about it, and Walls Came Tumbling Down. Jonathan Eads' book on King. Jackie Kennedy, what she said about King. FBI reports. None of this stuff is coming from conservatives.
Right.
It is coming from liberals, and they are putting this information out, and then we check it and cross-reference it, and it's true.
Right. 100%. 100%. I mean, when I do my research, I hardly ever read people who agree with me. I don't want to have my sensibilities validated by, and that's not to say that there aren't a lot of great conservative and Christian scholars and researchers and historians. There are, but for me, I want to go to direct sources. I want to read those who are close to King. I want to read his own papers, such as I have. There's a book called Dangerous Friendship. Have you read it? By Ben Kamen?
I haven't.
Rabbi Ben Kamen. He wrote a book called Dangerous Friendship that explores the relationship between Stanley Levison.
I've heard of it. King and Stanley Levison. Yes, I have. I've heard of it. I've never read it though.
And he's somebody who is as liberal as they come. In order to, in the process of writing his book, he interviewed Clarence Jones, who was King's attorney. He interviewed some other folks from King's inner circle. And he wrote the book not to expose King and the civil rights movement, but rather to justify King and the civil rights movement, to justify his relationship with Stanley Levison. He acknowledges in the book that Stanley Levison was a secular Jewish atheist who worked for publications like the Churchman for the very purpose of Sovietizing the Christian faith.
Wow.
He acknowledges the fact that Levison left the Communist Party in 1956, the CPUSA, not because he disagreed with communism, but he wanted to evade the scrutiny that comes with being a communist when working with a popular movement like the civil rights movement. He didn't want for their adversaries to say, "Oh, you have a communist working for you." He can say, "Well, nope, not technically. I no longer am with the Communist Party." But Kamen basically admits in the book that that even though he divorced himself from the CPUSA, he didn't divorce himself from communism. Kamen said this, somebody who was a sympathizer with Levison and the civil rights movement. And also Clarence Jones, who was King's attorney, admits that he was the one who set up the sexual meetings between women and King, that he actually sent women to King's motel rooms whenever he would travel. So, this it's very explosive, but again, it wasn't meant to be explosive. It was meant to justify and humanize King. And in reality, they're telling it all,
Yeah, and when you and I didn't get into the whole thing with the Highlander Folk School.
Yeah.
How it was a Columbus training camp and how Rosa Parks and Abernathy all went through that school and how the guys who started and they were all communists. I mean, it was, and they all denied it. They always denied it, for communists. Yeah. It was part of that. And you have this great footage of these old guys now admitting it. Just admit, yeah, we were all communists. We were all involved in it. We were all successful. We all recruited one another. And when you have a nation state like the Soviet Union that had endless cash and reserves to give to you to press this ideology and to infiltrate the United States of America, good God, man, it was unbeatable. And before the government caught on to it, they had done it. And now they have these old hats, from Pelosi to Jesse Jackson to Sharpton, all of them were educated during that time, and they've taught a younger generation now the Black liberation theology, the Black politicians. They all have to come through their Highlander folk school, and they just teach them the Marxism, this modern day Marxism, how to hide it, how to lie about it, how to get elected, and then how to go into the government and get what they want. Look, man, when you look at the fact that right now in the Black community, probably half the people there are more, when you go to these ghettos, probably more on government assistance and can't survive without it. You have yourself a communist system set up in the United States of America in the inner cities, and they have the leverage to vote their people in. If they did nothing for their cause, they understood that if you get Black people to vote, they just might be the margin that we need to take over the Democratic Party and most of the time the government of the United States of America, and they've done it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, we're going to get more into the Highlander Folk School in the next episode, which streams this weekend.
Oh, good. Because that's a lot of people don't know about Highlander and what it was and where it came from and who went there and how it was like the Harvard of Marxists.
Right.
And then sent them out to do their dirty work all over the country.
100%. The Scrapping Beauty said, Vince Ellison, your books made me understand the Democratic platform. Thank you. As a little girl, my dad said, question everything. How do we get more people to question their political parties that use and abuse them?
The best thing you can do is tell people to go to me and Chad Jackson's website and watch our shows. We bring it every week, and we challenge everyone to check our work. Every week, check what we say. And when you check it and read and study to be approved, you will then find that you have to accept ignorance and slavery, or you have to be brave enough and courageous enough to accept the truth. You cannot be free without courage. Freedom takes courage. You find the person that wants to stay at home all the time up under their mom and their daddy. They know they won't go anywhere. They're fearful, they're scared. Freedom takes courage. So have the courage to tell people, if you don't want to believe me, watch Chad Jackson, watch Vince Ellison, and then check their work. And if you still accept this, deal with it, because you're just choosing to be a slave. So yeah, so just give me information, dear. That's what I do. I would just share information. I share books, I share pamphlets, I share websites. I used to say stuff and show it on television, but now you have the ability to show it on your phone. I used to argue with guys. I say, look, man, you know that Obamacare, a page for a free sex change operation? Man, no, I don't. You lie, man. You tripping. Around the phone. Read. One source. Want another one? Read. And then they have to be convicted. Carry your information with you like a gun. Have your shorts, have your information, everything in the ready. So when you talk to a person, they call you a lie, show them the source.
Right.
And they have to deal with it. Or just have to admit that they take comfort in being a slave.
There you go. Cognitive dissonance is always at play, it seems.
Yes, it is.
Prodigal has returned. Thank you, by the way, Scrapping Beauty, for that $10 super chat. Prodigal has returned, $20 super chat. At MLK's funeral, I heard what I thought was the mother put a piercing wall, but it was his father. Let's see. Why can't I read this? Okay. Let me try again. At MLK's funeral, I heard that what I thought was his mother put a piercing wall, but it was his father being held up.
Oh.
It was at the moment I surmised MLK's father was a LGBT. It was a womanly well, not a man overcome. I guess he was saying that.
Yeah, I recall that scene. You remember? You probably saw it, Chad, when his father first saw his son's body.
Yeah,
and he screamed and he fainted and he had to carry him out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a piercing well. So he was crying very loudly.
Yeah, he saw his body and Daddy King just screamed and he fell. And they had to carry him out. It's very, 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 very sad scene. I ain't going no further with that, Chad.
I mean, I shouldn't laugh. I can't imagine seeing my child in a casket, but yeah. No, I actually didn't. I have watched the funeral. That
was like the first viewing before the funeral when they first got him there. I think it was at Morehouse, and the people were just coming around to see him for the first time. And I think Daddy King came out and saw him for the first time before the funeral. And because King laid in state at Morehouse, I don't know how many days for the funeral. And there's this constant line of people. So when they first got him there, it was like the day after he got shot. And they embalmed him and bought him and put him on display at Morehouse. Matter of fact, if you watch this HBO documentary, King in the Wilderness, have you seen it?
Mm-hmm.
You need to watch it. It's very good. It talks about the last 2 years of King's life. I think they show it on there, King in the Wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get a chance to watch that, it's the last part when they bring him into Morehouse, and the people come in for the first time to see him, and Daddy King comes in, and when he sees him, he screams, and then he just collapses, and Andrew Young them grab him and pick him up, and they just take him out of the place. So I think it's when they saw him in Morehouse while the people were coming through to watch him for the first time. Yeah. Got you. KB, I'm gonna need Chad to zoom in or get a bigger monitor. I guess I'm having to lean in to read. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. However, what threw me is this typo, and the prodigal has returned. Their comment. They meant to put. They probably put a well instead they put a wall. Out a piercing well. Yeah. And the word put is what threw me. And the P is right next to the O on the keyboard. So that's an understandable typo. Anyway, Vince, this was such an honor. I'm going to get with April and yourself to try to come up with a date for myself and hopefully Chuck to get to Lynchburg to have a sit-down conversation about some of these sidebars, if you will. Chad, where are you? Are you down in Dallas? I'm in Dallas, yes. Well, look, if you want, me and April can fly down there. I have a sister and a brother-in-law down in Dallas. You love it. Name's okay. Yeah, man, great guy. Awesome. Yeah, so you can come up here, or we can fly down there. It's whatever you want to do. Sweet. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate your time. We're going to go ahead and close out here. I'm going to play some music on the way out, and Vince, I'll see you next time. God bless. Well, brother, thank you for what you're doing. You're doing a great job, Chad. You're shaking up the world. And what you're doing will not be forgotten. The cool thing is you're a young man, and this is just the beginning. You're gonna change everything. And I'm just glad to be a part of it. Amen. Thank y'all. Love y'all.
All right, friends. Vince Everett Ellison is here. I want you to go to my website. And on my website, you're gonna see a lot of great stuff, man. You're gonna see that we got t-shirts, we got caps, you got my books, my documentaries, you got all kinds of stuff on VinceSpeaksTruth.com. Go there. We're dropping new t-shirts. We're dropping new merchandise. My new book, The End of Tolerance, is there. The End of Tolerance. Make sure you get it. Make it #1. If you got my first 3, get The End of Tolerance. It's just as good. And it's telling us we have to end our tolerance with these leftists, these Democrats. We can no longer allow them to sexually groom our children. We can no longer allow them to castrate little boys and call them little girls, run God out of the public square. Take away our guns, take away our sovereignty. No longer allow it. So go on VinceSpeaksTruth.com. That is VinceSpeaksTruth.com. Hit merchandise. You'll see the t-shirts. You'll see the caps. You'll see the books. You'll see the documentaries. You'll see it all. And let's keep this ball rolling. God bless you.